8:50. Good morning. This is your Wednesday edition of Newsmakers. The time is 8:38, and we have one of my very, very favorite guests in the house, Dr. Jim Atkins. Good morning, Doctor.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm fantastic. How are you doing?
Can't complain. Got started off with a soggy morning, though.
I'm pleased to learn that Kenya's not afraid of the thunder as my big 100-pound lab is.
No, his brother Alex is, though.
Okay.
He's a Cocker Spaniel.
Alex doesn't like it at all.
No, he's one of those shake and shiver type people.
I could better handle if Alex jumped in my lap at 4 a.m. than I could Hootie Jack. He's a big boy, and I didn't know he was quite so agile to go from one chair over the table into my lap, but he did. So how many pets do you have?
We just have the two boys.
Oh, okay. That's enough?
Yeah, they're brothers. Kenya's the black lab, and Alex is his brother, who's a Cocker Spaniel.
And are they inseparable except when Kenya's working?
They actually do like each other. They try not to show it sometimes, but they protect each other. So it's interesting to see their dynamics.
We've dealt with that with our lab. We had a lab mix, and then, of course, Hootie. And the lab mix at age 15, unfortunately, passed away not too long ago. So we're dealing with that separation anxiety, yeah. He's missing having his best friend, who absolutely hated him when we brought him home, by the way. But anyway, so we have been talking with you now and love the fact that you're a regular with us to discuss so many different topics. It all began with health care and what was happening with Obamacare, but it's kind of morphed into a lot of different things going on culturally, politically, and, of course, medically. And we've also included you as a guest writer on Goldsboro Daily News. But what we haven't done, we haven't told anybody who you are. Yeah, they know you as Dr. Jim Atkins.
Right, yeah.
But I just learned something about you about 3 minutes ago that I find so incredibly fascinating. You don't just speak English. Now, I knew about the French because of Kenya, and that's how he was raised. So you have to give him commands and talk to him
in French, right?
In French. It doesn't stop there.
Well, no. I took French in high school, and I hated French.
Really?
Actually, I took French in 7th and 8th grade because I had to, and then I took it in 9th grade, and I really did not do very well in French because I wasn't interested. And so actually, I did pass the year with a D, a 2 in conduct and a 3 in effort, by the way. Which was not very good. Those are not good numbers. A 1 is a good number. So then I went ahead and switched over to German because I needed a foreign language in high school. That's when we had to do that, and so I took German. So I took German for a couple years in, I guess, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade, probably 3 years in high school and then 1 year in college, and really enjoyed German. Got where I would dream in German, and which is really sort of neat when you're dreaming in a foreign language. So, but then I lost my German over the next 20 years because I didn't practice and I didn't do it. So then I started back relearning German with audio tapes, and Pimsleur is a great system to learn how to speak a language. So I used audio tapes and relearned my German. Then I started working on French.
But you didn't stop there. How many languages do you know?
Well, I can get by if I was to travel in French, German, Russian, Italian. I got by well in Greece with Greek, and then Spanish, so I can get by in Spanish. So, but as far as really communicating, my best languages are German and French.
Do you ever find that useful in your line of work? I mean, do you ever have patients that...
It's amazing. I mean, even here in Goldsboro, we have a number of people from Haiti. They speak French, and so recently in the hospital, I had a patient, and obviously he wasn't understanding much of what I said, and so then we tried to work with things in French. Then he actually became a little more oriented and actually then be able to communicate in English. So, but also the good thing is the technology that's out there nowadays. You can, if you're not sure what the words are, you can type it into your Google Translator and type it in English. It'll print it off in foreign language, and then you can read it, or they can read it. So that's a great way for us to help communicate with people.
I've actually done that, so you're right. It's quite fascinating. And going back to school, what type of student were you in school?
Probably average. I realized in college, if I had studied like I should have in high school, I would have done much better. And then I realized in med school that if I studied like I had to in med school, that I would have done even better in college. So, I mean, I grew up in a small town that was a college town, much like Chapel Hill is, a little town called Amherst, Massachusetts, where Amherst College is located. They also have the University of Massachusetts at Amherst, which is the main campus of about 30,000 students. And then there's Hampshire College that's in Amherst. And then not far away is Smith College in Northampton and Holyoke Massachusetts. So grew up in a college area, although my father was a farmer.
And you've mentioned that in some of the stories that you've written or articles you've written for Goldsboro Daily News that you grew up on a farm.
Yeah.
And now you had a brother. Did you have other siblings? Or?
Yeah, I have one brother and 3 sisters. And my brother teaches industrial psychology in New York. Then I have a sister in Washington, one in California, and one here in Goldsboro.
Oh, I did not realize that you had a sister here in Goldsboro.
Yep.
I was going to say they're spread all over the country,
Yes,
though, aren't they?
are. Yes.
So growing up on a farm, my father did, so there weren't, your job was to work, and that's what you were going to do and continue the family business. But you chose a different path.
Well, actually, I don't think I was ever encouraged to necessarily continue the family business. My uncle was, though my father had a small farm, my uncle's farm was bigger, and so I actually did most of my work on my uncle's farm. He had 300 acres of apple trees, and so that's a lot of apple trees. And so we worked mostly in the apple orchards. So it was good growing up. Yes, at one point he had like 50 head of cattle, so there's the getting in the hay, and there was those sorts of things. But my father at one point had 37,000 chickens. So I mean,
oh my gosh,
yeah. So there was different things growing up. I think you learn growing up on a farm very early what work is, and I mean, I knew that I had to get up before going to school. I went down and with my parents or with my father and my brother, and I fed the chickens on the top floor. My brother fed the second floor, and my father did the bottom two floors. And so a work ethic is very important in our society, and that's one of the problems that I think we have right now, is that we have a society that it's more of what's about me and not what can I do to be self-sufficient and take care of things and take care of other people. I think developing a work ethic is something that's very important for people to teach their children.
I could not agree with you more, and that's one of the biggest things missing in today's society.
Yes, it is. It's more of a gimme, 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 and I want it now, and I want everything, and I want it now, and I don't want to have to work for it type philosophy, and that's just not the way it works.
Gratification. Instant gratification. And our children have been taught that from
us.
Yeah, exactly. Unfortunately, the internet has been a big player in it, and Game Boy systems or whatever you want to call them, because they get instant gratification. They click a button and what they wanted to see is there.
Yep, that's true.
And fast food, I'm hungry right now. I'll just pull through here and tell the guy in the window what you want. So there's so many different ways, but
True.
That really has been a detriment. I know we're getting ready to come to a break. When we come back, we want to talk a little bit more about this, and then we'll venture into some other subjects, because I know you've been very good this morning, and let me talk to you about the real Jim. Take the doctor away from him. We'll come back and talk about the doctor part, but I know we're going to have to go to break in just a second. So we thank you for sharing this. We'll be right back right after these messages. And here we go with the circus music, Dr. Atkins. Good morning, WGBR News Talk 1150. Time is 8:50, and it is your Wednesday edition of Newsmakers with Dr. Atkins. We learned a little bit about him, and now we're going to let his expertise and all his wonderful knowledge help with perhaps a daunting subject this morning. I read an article yesterday, read a story about how heroin is really on the rise, and particularly in eastern North Carolina. And what I was most shocked about is it said that prescription painkillers have been the drug of choice now for so long, and a lot of people have gone to that and have become addicted. But they're discovering that heroin is cheaper.
We do have a number of folks here. I mean, I have a number of patients who use heroin or have used heroin. And obviously, the guy in New York who OD'd, I guess apparently from what the newspapers say on heroin, it's a scary drug. I think that what I would like to see is getting back to the Reagan era where we had a drug czar who actually was committed to dealing with the hard drugs. The hard drugs that are out there, whether it's cocaine or heroin, we've got to be more aggressive with those, at least from my perspective. We've got to keep them out of the country. And, there's a lot more, I think, that we can do, and we've just got to do it, because if we don't, it's going to destroy our society and our fabric. I don't think marijuana is an issue. I mean, I think from a medical perspective, I'd like to see the availability of marijuana like they have in 20 other states in this country, because I've had a lot of people who've used marijuana from a medical perspective when they're nauseated with cancer and chemotherapy. And initially, I didn't think we needed it. I said, yeah, who cares? We got good stuff. We got good medicines that'll take care of it. But in reality, it does make a difference. So people can be nauseated and can use some marijuana, and within a period of 30 seconds or so, their nausea is gone. And when you're dealing and dying with cancer, getting rid of nausea and getting rid of pain are critical, I think. So, but somehow we've got to find ways to stem the flow of heroin, and whether that means AWACS in the air along our coast to intercept boats, doubling the Coast Guard, and if Somalia people can track ships and boats that are out there to hijack, I'm sure that we have the capability to do the same with ships and boats that are coming in from Central America, and that we can do a better job if we choose to. For some reason, we have not chosen to really focus on the hard drugs, which I think are really, I mean, they're destroying people. They're destroying families. And here in Goldsboro, I mean, it's not just New York.
No.
The hard drugs are a real issue, and addiction is a problem. I think people get addicted from using pain medicines, like with cancer patients, and the answer is no. I don't think I've had a patient get addicted in 30 years. I have had 2 people sell their drugs, but that's not addiction. That's a felony, and then they have to live in Raleigh for a little time. Now, they have a place up there called Central. We've got to stem the flow of hard drugs into this country, and we've got to be aggressive about it, and we need a drug czar. We need somebody who's going to put the effort into getting this, or we can just expect that our next generation is going to have more troubles than the last one, and it will continue until those kinds of drugs are controlled better by the government. But those drugs have to be controlled.
Do we shut down the borders?
I think as far as drugs, we need to find ways to shut it down. I mean, I can't imagine that we don't have technology that can detect tunnels easier than what we're doing. The technology that's out there is phenomenal, and there's got to be technology that can, spraying coca fields is one thing, spraying opium fields, I guess, is another, but that's not the way we've got to do it. We've got to take the profit out of it, and that's one reason why I'd like to see marijuana legalized. I'd love to see the cartel no longer get their money from marijuana. I'd rather see it legalized, regulated, and taxed, just like they do everything else. And rather than giving the money to some cartel in South America, I'd rather the money go to our government.
And before anybody gets up in arms, there's scientific or medical fact that marijuana is not necessarily an addictive drug, nor is it one that leads to hardcore drugs, so to speak, like a lot of people believe.
The biggest problem with marijuana is it makes you lazy.
Right.
So it's very critical that if and when it becomes available medically, that, again, this is not something that you want teenagers using because, again, it's going to make them stupid. It's going to make them lazy. They're not going to do well in school. They're just going to be there zoned out. And that's not what we need either, But I think from a medical perspective, having somebody not having to be nauseated and feel like they're going to throw their toenails up all the time is important. Whether it should be approved for recreational use, I don't know. But I think from a medical perspective, I would love to see it. Right now we have a drug called THC, tetrahydrocannabinol, which is available, which is the active agent in marijuana. It's called Marinol, and obviously the name comes from marijuana. But, they charge, I think it's like $2,000 or $3,000 a month for the prescription. A lot of folks can't do that. So again, it's just a matter of how do we control their symptoms and how do we make people feel better as they're dealing with terminal illnesses like cancer or other terminal illnesses. There can be other terminal illnesses that people have where it might be a benefit as well.
Well, it makes a lot of sense. And, obviously there are other states that have
approved
chosen
it.
Exactly.
Yeah, there's 20 of them or thereabouts. And so, it's a matter of time. The country has had trouble dealing with some of these issues in the past and differentiating it, obviously, with things like prohibition that went in. And there was actually an amendment to the Constitution that dealt with prohibition. And then a few years later, there was the amendment to the Constitution was removed and prohibition was rescinded. People mean well. They really care about our country. And I think that's the important issue, is that we've got to have people who care. And we've got to have people who are forward-thinking and who are willing not just to accept old dogma, but really try to look at the facts and try to just see where do we need to put our efforts as we move forward.
Let me ask you a quick question back about the heroin use that we were talking about. If parents are listening this morning and suddenly, the radar is going off and they think, wait a minute, I'm seeing a lot of differences in my child right now.
Sure.
What are some of the signs?
Well, I think the biggest things are going to be a change in grades. You take an A-B student who's now all of a sudden a C-D student. There's only 3 reasons for that. 1, you're lazy. 2, you're stupid. Or 3, you're on drugs. And if they've been doing A and B, they're not stupid. That means they're either lazy or on drugs. And what do? You go to the grocery store or the drugstore, you get a drug screening test, and you tell them to pee in a pot for you. You're the parent, they're the child. And you make sure that they go ahead and go in the bathroom. They give you a urine specimen. If you don't trust them, fine. You have a little thermometer with you, electronic thermometer. You check the temperature of the pee, make sure it's the right temperature, put the stick in and see whether or not they've got drugs in their system. If they do, then you get some help. Or the other thing is you can just get help. But if you see a change in your child's behavior, yes, kids are going to be rebellious as they hit teenage years. But if you see things that are really disturbing and things that are changing, Johnny's always been in soccer, he's always done this, he's always done that, and all of a sudden things are changing. Because obviously we all try our best to raise our kids the best we can. I don't know of anybody who gets up every morning and says, gee, what can I do to mess up Johnny's life? You get up and you say, what can I do to help my family, help my children? I want them to be well. I want them to be well adjusted. I want them to grow up and be good citizens. But we also have to be the parent, and we have to do drug testing if you're concerned. And you have to set limits for your kids. And even with the limits and even with drug testing, you're going to do your best. But there's a song in the Fantastics musical, Plant a Radish, get a radish and not a Brussels sprout, but with children, you don't know what you're about because you can think you're going to get a radish and you get a Brussels sprout, you know? So with kids, it's hard. It really is hard.
Wow, thank you so much. That's going to be a big help to a lot of people out there. But unfortunately, that's going to do it for our Wednesday edition of Newsmakers. Dr. Atkins, as always, thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure.